I'm sure you've all heard of Rayman. You know, the cartoony video game character with no arms and legs. If you haven't heard of him, he's pretty famous. There's plenty of information on the internet if you just Google Rayman. Well, recently a new Rayman game was released for the Wii, Rayman Origins. The game made longtime fans of Rayman pretty happy, especially since the last three Rayman's games weren't really Rayman games at all, just stupid mini-game collections about ugly, screaming rabbits. The release of a real Rayman game sure must have made a lot of people happy. I know I was pretty excited when I first saw Rayman 4's box sitting on the shelf. Yep, you read that right, Rayman 4. I'm not talking about Origins or the cancelled one with all the leaked concept arts. This Rayman 4 appeared in about 2005. It wasn't licensed, but it certainly was canon. A little too canon. I grew up pretty poor. A lot of my clothes and toys were secondhand. The only computer my parents had was an old white box from 1995 that they'd found at a garage sale. I didn't think much of it. It was what I did my homework on. We never had any games for it, and internet access was too expensive for us. I did somehow manage to have a working PlayStation though. Probably another garage sale find. And that thing was my life. But since I didn't have internet, anything I learned about new games came to me the old-fashioned way. Friends, magazines, and Mark, the owner of the video game store down Colbert Road. The first few years with my PlayStation were actually kind of exciting. I'd get an allowance, then run down to the media giant, that was the store's name, and drive into the discount game bin, which had the only games I could afford. Then the PlayStation 2 came out, and, well, eventually there were no new games left for me to buy. I still like going into Media Giant, though, to find out what other people were playing and to try out the free demos. And that's how I saw the box on the shelf in the first place. Rayman 4. Read the blocky comic book-key letters on the front. Lumolution. My 16-year-old eyes grew wide. I have 2 Rayman games for the PlayStation at home. Of all the games I owned, they were by far my favorites. I stared at the box for Rayman 3 for a long time, studying the graphics, wondering what the game was like, and wishing for a PlayStation 2 so I could actually play it. What stood out mostly about Lumolution was its box. Instead of being in a long black DVD type case, it was in a short square jewel case like an old PlayStation game. I remember my fingers trembling. It couldn't be a game that would work on my system, could it? I picked up the box and turned it over. There was no sign of a PlayStation 2 logo on the box. Still. Hey Mac, what do you know about this Rayman game? I called. Mac was usually in the back playing video games if he thought the store was empty. Just a second, replied the scratchy voice. The familiar pinging of a saved Pokemon game rang fairly through the air, and moments later, a fat, sweaty redhead came rushing through the door. Which one? Asked Mac as he approached me. I cringed a little. Mac was a good guy, but his body odor... I'll never forget it. This some, I replied, holding up the box. He adjusted his tiny, round glasses and scratched his scraggly beard. Lotion, he slowly read. Weird name. I cringed again. It's Lum, not Loom, I corrected. Lumolution. Oh, haha, Max shrugged. Oops, welp, he studied the box again. I don't know that much about Rayman games. I didn't hear anything about a new Rayman coming out on the web either, but it came in with my shipment about a week ago, so I put it on the shelf. Max squinted. Kind of suspicious that it's in a different box. I'm wondering maybe if it's a bootleg. Do you think maybe you can play on the original PlayStation? Mac took the Rayman out of my hands and turned it over a few times. Huh. It does look like a PlayStation 1 game box, Mac nodded. I've got a PlayStation 1 in the back, actually. May as well try one of these out and see what it is. And so I followed Mac into his little man cave. In one corner of the back smelly room was a TV and several gaming consoles. In another corner was a computer, much newer than mine. Black, not white, with an internet window open, glowing cheerfully. A worm couch sat across from the TV screen, its cushions sagging downward where Mac usually sat. Several empty bags of cheese puffs lay scattered across the floor. Mac pulled the PlayStation out of the shelf and blew the dust off of it. I haven't played with this baby in a couple of months, he explained, but I didn't want to risk my new PlayStation 2. He fiddled with the wires in the back of the TV for a few minutes. Alright, it's in. Mac tore the plastic wrapping off of the game cover and popped open the case. The title seemed to be glowing in the dark. Very cool. I hope this doesn't catch my store on fire, Mac half joked as he placed the disc inside of the PlayStation and pressed the on button. The TV screen glowed yellow for a few seconds. Then a series of game developer logos began to flash across the screen. Oh good. It's working, Max sighed with relief. You've got mail, a cheerful voice called from the computer. Hey, you can try it out first if you want, Mac told me. I gotta take this email. Might be important. Max slowly rose off the couch and waddled over to his computer. I gripped the PlayStation controller in my hands. A new Rayman game. One I could play. I knew my allowance would end up towards something special. Rayman's familiar face filled the screen, contorted in cartoony panic. He looked frantically from left to right, then started running away from the screen, revealing a dark, spooky landscape. He ran around in a circle, crashing into a tree, and fell flat on his back. The words Rayman 4, Lumo Lotion, faded in slowly on the top of the screen while Halloweeny organ music played. My heart began to race excitedly. The graphics were already really good, much better than what I was used to seeing in the first two Rayman games. Actually, despite looking a little blocky, they seemed better than a lot of the newer games I'd sampled at Media Giant. There's no way this could be a bootleg, could it? Oh, there we go, Mac's voice made me jump. I'd already forgotten I was sitting in the back of a Media Giant. I just got an email about Rayman 4. Looks like there's supposed to be a Rayman 4 Lumo collecting tournament or something coming up in town, and Max scratched in the back of his head. See, I've never heard of a video game doing something like this before. Like what? I asked, turning around to look at the big, friendly guy. Well, apparently, when you collect enough looms in the game, you get a code. He paused and sniffed, and you take it to the store that you bought the game from, and we give you a form. Then you send it in, and you'll get a figurine. He scratched the back of his head again. It says the game has a limited release right now, so then they can give out the figurines. Then if you collect another pause, 4 figurines, what it says, you can enter the tournament. You just have to bring your figurines on your proof slips to the venue, which it says here is in the Staring Convention Center. I'm buying this, I said, immediately pulling my allowance out of my pocket. I have to play this game. Moments later, I was back at home, staring happily at the new PlayStation game in my hands. I couldn't believe my luck. Rayman 4, for the system I had. I nearly broke my controller as enthusiastically selecting new game. The screen went dark. A whiny, two-piece sounding voice came out of my speakers. He's going crazy! Frantic music began to play, and the familiar-looking blue frog jogged through a lush forest. Globux. He's going crazy, crazy, crazy! Globux yelled as he passed very strange-looking beings. Absolutely crazy! He seemed to have gone a little crazy himself. Globux, hold up, a teenager voice called. Globux turned around to face Rayman. Who's gone crazy? Asked the Totoro hero, scratching his fluffy hair in a confusing way. Globux's eyes grew oversized. His pupils darted from left to right. Polycus, Globux hissed. My jaw dropped in real life at the same time Rayman did on screen, though decidedly less far. Polycus was the creator of the world inside the Rayman games. He was the god, if you will, of Rayman. I squeezed my controller. Polycus? Gone mad? But how? But how? Rayman gasped, echoing my thoughts. He was sleeping as usual, Globux began, and a loom flew inside his mouth. I snorted a little. The looms were sort of like insects, giant balls of energy insects. So that made him wake up, and then he ate it. Globux finished, throwing his hands in the air as if that explained everything. That made him crazy? Rayman seemed as confused as I was. No, wailed Globux. Polycus decided that he liked the taste, and now he wants more. He's been changing his appearance from one minute to the next, destroying his own creations to get the lum's energies out of it. He'll stop at nothing to get the lums. Rayman, you gotta help. Globux's words were cut off by a loud crashing noise, followed by a chorus of high-pitched screams. The camera quickly switched to a small patch of bushes near Rayman and Globux. The scream became louder as a group of lums shot out of the bushes. I gasped. These lums looked a lot different than the ones in the game I'd played. They had eyes, and arms, and legs, and mouths. And they all looked horribly terrified at whatever was chasing them. An enormous webbed feet stomped the bushes flat. The camera angle planed upward to reveal Polycus, now an enormous golem version of himself with glowing golden eyes, a long windpipe, and a hungry expression on his face. I am hungry. Polycus' deep voice echoed. I want lumps. I've got you, lums, called Rayman's voice from off-screen. Polycus looked downward to see the tiny hero staring up at him. Globus stared at his best friend in horror. Rayman, what are you doing? Rayman, you would help me? Polycus' voice boomed. Yeah, just go away for a little while. I've got you all the lums you can eat, Rayman declared. Now it was Globus' turn to drop his jaw to the ground at the same time I did. Ah, the giant god voice sighed constantly. That would be fantastic. Temporary pause. Polycus stomped away. Globus, jaw still on the floor, turned to look at Rayman. What are you thinking? Globus yelled. You can't feed him lums. He's made of lumps. His appetite will only get worse. Don't worry, friend, Rayman beamed, putting a floating hand on Globus's shoulder. I'm just stalling him. If we can keep him happy for a while, maybe we can find a way to get rid of his lumps addictions without him suspecting a thing. Better than nothing, shrugged Globus. I'm all in for it. And so I plunged into the first level, collecting 20 lumps, then returning to the spot. A one-looking box on the screen read, it wasn't a difficult task. It was the first level. The lumps were plentiful, and then of course was simple. I'd found 30 lumps by the time I reached the beginning again. Focus's giant foot appeared on screen as Rayman held up the brown stack, which was quivering nervously as the captured lumps tried to escape. Level complete, read another wooden box. Then a different screen appeared with a password on it. I scrambled for a piece of paper and quickly wrote down the code Y3LLOLUMZ. As I continued, I found the game was surprisingly dark and complex for a Rayman game. Collect more lumps in lump collecting level, and you would get more time to complete the information gathering levels. Fail to complete the information gathering levels in the selected time, you would lose a life and have to replay the lump collecting level to applause Poculus. I was also somewhat pleased to discover that the first level, the code words were nearly as easy to find, meaning that it would be harder for others to enter the tournament. The next day I headed back to the myuuji I and handed in my first code the moment the store opened its doors. Matt gave me a proof of completion slip, so that's what a proof slip was. It told me that he would send in my form right away. Of course, I didn't think that meant that I would be getting my figurine the next day. So I was a little surprised that there was a package for me in the mailbox. I was even more surprised at what was in the package. The figurine was a complete, perfect replica of a Rayman for Lum, looking positively giddy, despite its role as bait in game. The figure came with a tiny card describing how Lums were generally happy, simple creatures, unless being chased by a power-hungry Poculus. Over the next few weeks, every moment of my spare time was dedicated to Rayman 4. I knew that with my lack of access to modern consoles, this would be my one chance to win a video game tournament in my hometown, so I was determined to get all 4 figurines. A few weeks later, I had 3 more smiling, happy Lums. This seemed a bit weird to me. Not that Lums were a bad thing, of course, but why were the figurines so happy when the Lums were always terrified in the game? And why were there no figurines of the other characters in game? I expected to get maybe Rayman, Gollum Pollux. Anything but what I was getting in the mail. But it was a lum collecting tournament, so I decided that literally collecting lums was a quite clever gimmick to get more people to enter the contest. I was surprised at how many people were at the Sterling Convention Center that cold, wet morning. It seemed like all of the boys from my high school were there. Not so many of the girls. I guess most girls just don't like playing video games as much as boys do. There were clusters of younger girls here and there, all determined to beat us teenagers, and even a couple of little kids standing there proudly and admiring their 4 lums. I should have known something was wrong when I saw the expression on the ticket taker type guy behind the podium at the door. His round, dark-colored eyes grew wide as he saw the crowd of young people at the doorway, waiting to get in and collect the most lums. He twirled his puggy white glove nervously. Well, welcome to the Lums collection, he stammered in a nasally, slightly slurred voice. The tournament, I'm Glenn Baxter, and I'll be registering you. He picked up a glass bottle and took a long drink from it. If everyone could just form an orderly line and present your lums. My mind was boggled. Glenn Baxter was even rounder than Max was, and as I discovered when I played my lum collection to him, smellier too. I hoped that Glenn Baxter wasn't too involved in the tournament, or else I'd faint before I even collected a single lum. His stench was like a mixture of foot funk and murky swamp water. His face, which had a red, rubby complexion, looked slightly green and pale, probably from either the cold weather or his own body odor. The glass bottle of the Permian, which he drank deeply from even so often, was labeled Sugar Plum Soda. Fortunately for us Rayman players, Glenn Baxter stayed outside in the fresh air for quite some time as he verified the authenticity of the slips that players without figurines were holding. Those who made it past Glenn's inspection, which was most of us, were headed into a large central area by 4 men, dressed identically in long, dark green coats and name tags that read Official Judge. Follow us, please. Not straying off unless you want to be disqualified. Keep up, please. The tournament is this way. I couldn't tell which judge was saying what as they led us to the tournament room. All 4 men were resembly short for their age, and they looked and sounded so much like each other that they could have been brothers. By that point, I should have known something was wrong, but the tournament area was so impressive that any suspicions I had were completely wiped from my mind. There were several dozen TV sets scattered around the room, each with a PlayStation and a comfortable-looking couch in front of them. Next to each couch was a large side table filled high with a bag of chips and juice box. A high banner hung on the ceiling read, Lumo Lotion. Cardboard standees of Rayman, Globux, and Testes and other game characters stood in random arrangements around the room. At the end of the hall was a giant inflatable of Glumpalkus, and more intentionally a small temporary room placed right between Palkus's short legs. The tournament judges appeared to be doing all they could to keep the noisier contestants away from the room. Welcome to the Loom Lotion tournament, a chipper young-sounding voice called over the convention center PA. I'm Renard Manning, and I'll be the host this morning. If everyone could just gather in front of Polkus for a few minutes, we can get started early. Renard Manning was a scrawny-looking, pale young man with large, neatly combed, light brown hair. As he raised his arms to get the contestants to quiet down, his puffy, dark purple overcoat looked much too big for him. Good morning, all, Renard chipped into his microphone. I think everybody's been accounted for at this point, so in just a few minutes, you'll be collecting Luma and competing for the championship title. A cheer rose from the crowd of gamers. I punched my fist in the air and screamed with the others, completely unaware of what I was getting into. As you can see, continued Renard, there are 55 gaming stations set up around this room. Each PlayStation is equipped with a special version of Rayman 4 created just for this tournament. You all get 1 hour time to practice and prepare yourselves. When you hear this sound, a loud buzzer noise suddenly played over the PA, causing everyone in the room except for Renard to cover their ears. The tournament will officially begin. There are about 300 of you today, so you'll be grouped 6 or 7 to a station. I don't want any arguments and absolutely no fighting. You'll Want to save your energy for collecting lums? Renard winked. The judges will keep an eye on things and make sure they're fair. He motioned to the 4 short men standing next to them, all of which nodded slowly and stoically. Now, get out there and start collecting. Renard Manning blew an air horn, and the room seemed to explode as everyone in it dashed to the gaming console. I found myself on an old green and yellow couch with 2 guys I knew from school. A college-age girl who was taking the semester off at her uncle's place, and 2 twin boys who couldn't have been older than 10 years old. After a bit of arguing, basically the twins thought that it wasn't fair to play against adults, and they should get to practice for the whole hour, we all began taking turns on the tournament version of Lumolution. The first thing we noticed was that the graphics in the tournament version were much better than the ones in the home version. They looked like they belonged in a CGI movie, not a 2005 game. Everyone marveled at the visual improvement of Rayman bouncing across the screen, and cringed at the horrified faces of the lums, which were now painfully detailed, their eyes misery with fearful tears. This game's kind of stupid, Derek, one of the games from school commented. The lums supposed to turn evil if you scare them. I don't get why they don't turn evil and fight back. They're only the red lums, stupid, one of the twins yelled. These ones are yellow. I don't think so. He's right, cut in the college girl. It was the red lumps, not the yellow ones. I have no idea what you're talking about. Whatever, Derek sighed. Just pass me the controller. The hour seemed to be over much too soon, and the tournament began. The 4 judges walked to each individual group. They all moved as if they were a single 4-headed being to explain the rules. It's an elimination round, one judge began. Only one will be the victor, another explained. Whoever wins is to wait at the bottom of Pokeless for the second round to begin, a third went on. And no cheating, the 4th one added. With that, they let us explain the rules to the next couch over, and our group began to play. 2-player mode put both players in the same level at the same time as Rayman and Globux. Players collected as many lums as possible, the person with the most lums winning the round. I was secretly pleased to find that the others in my group didn't really know as much about playing Rayman games as I did. Derek was out first, followed by one of the twins, then the other guy from my high school, can't remember his name anymore, then the other twin. Finally was down to the college girl and me. You're not gonna cry if you lose, are you? She smirked. Nope, I'm not gonna lose, I replied, giving her an equally cocky smile. We both entered 2-player mode and went for every lum within our reach. At first she had no trouble keeping up with me, which surprised me, since she seemed to win every other round by the skin of her teeth. I decided it was time to turn my game up a notch and began to purposefully scouting out the lums that were more well hidden. Soon she began to make frustrated grunts and groans as I nodded the lums she had missed to my collection. Finally, after I was 25 lums ahead of her, she threw her controller down and yelled, "Fine, okay, you win, jeez." As if a magic word had been uttered, I felt a hand on my shoulder. I jumped and turned around to see one of the judges. "Well, it looks like you will be competing in the next part of the tournament, won't you?" He smiled gently at me. I couldn't help but hear a note of sadness in his soft words, but I was caught in the excitement of the moment and didn't care what was going on in the judge's weird mind. I won the first round. I was going to have a chance of winning the whole thing. After a brief chip and soda break, the 54 other winners walked to the giant Pokeless inflatable for leg 2 of the Lumined Collection tournament. The losers were told they could leave whenever they wanted to, but they were free to stick around and watch the rest of the competition. While we had been playing Rayman 4, 55 plastic folding chairs had been set up in front of a small, boxy room, one for each of the round winners. "Take a seat," Renard Manning smiled, gesturing towards the chairs. "Round 2 is going to be quite a bit different than round 1. You see," Renard grinned, pulling out a fresh light from his coat and shining it on his face as if he was about to tell a scary story. "Only the best lum collectors will make it to the third and final round. The others will have to be," he raised a hand and wiggled his fingers, "eliminated." Manning's words were met with an equal parts gasp and groans from the remaining gamers. I wriggled impatiently in my seat. "However," Renard raised one of his chubby fingers, "in this round, it will be just you against the game." He stepped to one side and motioned to the temporary room behind him. "These rounds will be held in private in Pokeless judging room. If you don't pass the test," the smile on his face suddenly seemed to waver for just a moment, "then you won't make it to the next round. Would the winner of group number 1 step up to Pokeless judging room, please?" One of the judges, standing by himself this time, called. A timid-looking girl, this one even younger than the twins, stood up from her chair and walked over to the boxy room, where the door was opened by yet another of the look-alike judges. "Right this way, please," the 5th judge half muttered. "I'm scared," the girl squeaked. The 5th judge took her hand, patted her on the back warmly, and led her into the room. A stiff silence filled the air. Would she make it? Several minutes later, a piercing scream rang through the air, followed by a rather glum-looking little girl leaving Pokeless judging room. I'm sorry that you lost. I'm so sorry," the 5th judge stammered. "Have a nice day. I'm so sorry," the little girl was silent as she walked slowly back to her seat and folded her arms angrily. "Would the winner of Group 2 step up to the Pokeless judging room, please?" Most of the contestants afterwards followed the same routine as the first. Total silence from the room, then a scream of frustration. I assumed that was what it was. And finally, the contestants leaving the room looking completely upset after apparently losing. Every so often, though, someone would defeat the challenge, whatever it was, and leave the room looking utterly ecstatic that they were advanced to the next round. Would the winner of group number 28 step up to the Pokeless judging room, please? 28. That was my number. It was my turn. My turn to see exactly what was so frustrating behind the closed door. I stood up in the plastic chair and began nervously walking towards the judge room. The giant inflatable Pokeless was quite scary up close. His head was tilted slightly downward, as if he was watching the contestants enter the room. Step in quickly. Now, there are many others," muttered the judge outside the boxy room. Yes, no time to waste. Step in quickly now, please," the judge inside the door continued in the same strange tone. I entered the room, and the door was shut behind me. Inside the room was a single TV system, a PlayStation, and one of those rocking gamer chairs that you see around Christmas time. "You may start collecting lums whenever you are ready," the judge told me. "All you have to do is complete one level. Just one." I sat down in my chair, picked up the controller, which was slippery with sweat from other contestants, and looked at the screen. "Wow," I breathed at the same game beginning. Just as in my copy of the game at home, Rayman's face filled the screen, his fearful eyes starting from left and right. But the graphics of this version of Rayman 4 were even better than the tournament version I had just been playing moments before. Rayman's model was so detailed that he looked positively realistic now. Tiny beads of sweat dripped down his snout as he backed away. His chest heaved in and out, as if he'd been running for a long time. Lumolution Tournament Round 2, read the title on the screen. Press any button to play. My fingers gripped the controller handles as my thumb matched the X button. Collect 500 lums in 4 minutes, then return to this spot. Read the mission screen. I whistled absolutely. 500 lums. I didn't think there was a single level in a regular version of the game with 500 lums, but this was a special version of the game for the tournament, so I assumed that whatever level I was playing would be ripe with lums. Rayman appeared on screen, and immediately I sensed something was wrong. No matter which button I pressed, Rayman did seem to want to move. Actually, he did start to move. He began to quake, muttered, "Please don't make me do this. Please don't make me do this." I frowned. What kind of game was this? Was there a bug in the system? I turned around to look at the judges. I raised my eyebrow. "Keep playing," the judge ordered, as if nothing was wrong. I shrugged and tried pressing L, which usually made Rayman jump. This time, Rayman sat on the ground and curled up in the fetal position. "Pocahontas, I don't want to do this," he sobbed. "I can't do this anymore. There's not enough lums left." A wave of nostalgia swept over my stomach. Maybe it was the ultra-realistic graphics, but I suddenly felt like Rayman's time had run out for real, and no extra lives could save him this time. "But I need more lums," the voice of Vocalist boomed as his giant frog-like foot appeared on the screen once again. I choked. The rocky textures of a gigantic golem Poculus looked almost too real to be a PlayStation graphic. "If you do not bring me lums," Poculus continued, "then I will extract them from you." Poculus crackled with glee and grabbed Rayman with a giant webbed hand. "No, please," gasped Rayman, struggled to break free from the mighty god's grip. I can find you more lums. I can appease your hunger. Just give me more time. I just need a little more time." "Ah," Poculus sighed contentedly again, then gently placed Rayman on the ground. "Thank you." "Rayman," Glubbock's whiny voice hissed as his head appeared in the bushes. "What are you doing? You can't keep stalling. He'll eat everything." A sad, serious look crossed Rayman's face. My heart began to pound. I'd never seen Rayman make such a somber face. "Lums are energy, right?" Rayman asked Glumbus. The big blue frog nodded. "Right." "Well, we're not the only world with energy," Rayman exclaimed. Then he turned to face me. "Every world is energy." Rayman's tone grew dark. "And with energy, there are lumps." "I'm so sorry." A voice whispered from behind me. I turned to discover the judge dabbing his eyes with a handkerchief. "What?" I was certain I heard him wrong. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry," he repeated quietly. "For what?" I asked, though it didn't take me long to find out. The judge pushed me from the rocking chair from behind, launching me towards the screen. I screamed and crashed against the screen. No. It was too squishy to be the screen, and it smelled like a mixture of foot funk and monkey swamp water. I looked up to my horror that my face was pressed against Globux's chest. "I'm really sorry we have to do this," he squeaked as he grabbed my arms and held them behind my back. "I'm really, really sorry. Honest, I could feel ropes tied around my waist. But Raid still needs time." Globux nervously took a swing of plum juice from a large beer mug. "And here I was hoping you lose," the frog-like fellow drunkenly continued as he tied my feet together. "You seemed so unenergetic and lying." He made the knot tighter, cutting my circulation off to my feet. But Lum's energy and Poculus wants the best of him, so we have to do what we have to do. At first, his words seemed jumbled and confused me. Then the meaning hit me. "You're the ticket taker." Globus nodded sadly as these 3 testes emerged from a bush carrying a gigantic glass jug of stirring golden liquid. "We're sorry we have to do this," one of them began. "It's really not our fault," the second one explained. "Rayman's ideas are just a bit poorly planned, you see," the third one finished. "Wait, you're the jug..." My words were drowned as all 3 testes heavily heaved the jug forward, dousing me in yellow liquid they carried. I squeezed as hard as the hot golden stuff covered me. I wanted to yell. Oh, how I wanted to scream and holler at those testes until to time me this instant, but I couldn't. As the liquid drained, it had become sticky. So sticky that my mouth was quite literally glued shut. So I could only watch in my horror as what happened to me next. My arms and legs began to move uncontrollably. First a slight tremor, then suddenly emotional wobbles, until they finally deflated like toy balloons, leaving me with long, stringy noodle limbs. Then a violent, compressing sensation on my head, as if a giant monster was forcing me to crouch downward as far as I could. I scrunched my eyes shut. I didn't want to see any more of this, but I could still feel the unpleasant swelling of my stomach. It was like the kind of feeling you get after you've had too much soda, only much more intense. The next part is a little hard to describe, but I'm going to try it anyway. It was at once the painful feeling of the flesh of my back being quickly torn open, and the revealing feeling of something that was trapped underneath cloth finally breaking free. I nearly wet myself as I heard a loud fluttering noise come from behind me. I knew of only one thing that could make that noise: wings. The sensation finally dropped, so I opened my eyes. They seemed a lot larger now. I looked at my surroundings. Everything seemed normal, except it was enormous. I easily slipped through the ropes that once held my limbs together and immediately floated upward, conscious of my new wings that could not stop flapping. "What just happened?" I yelled at one of the testes, wiped the remainder of the sticky glue off of my tiny face. Actually, it was what I wanted to yell. It came out more like blah blah blah. The testy looked at his comparison, who all shrugged and shook their heads. Globus looked at me, tearful eyes once again. "I'm sorry, buddy," he whispered. "Go off and play. Maybe you'll get lucky and we won't find you for a while." He pointed off into the forest. I started for a few moments, looking back and forth from woods to Globus, until a sudden embrace took my entire body and I shot off into the woods, laughing cheerfully. Yes, I understood everything now. I was a lum. I had become a lum. And you know what? I didn't care anymore. I was a little yellow ball of energy. And now, boy, I did feel like a ball of energy. I whizzed through the branches, giggling to myself about nothing, singing nonsensical songs, chasing my fellow yellow lums around tree trunks and under rocks. I was so happy, so delighted to be full of energy. Then I hardly noticed that our numbers were growing fewer and fewer until the day that I happened upon Globus carrying some ropes through the woods. I watched him curiously from behind a rock for a while, because I had the strangest feelings that he was going to do something interesting. His shoulders were slumped over, and the sound of a sob quivered in his large throat. From out of nowhere, a strange-looking being appeared and smashed into Globus' chest, without even looking. Globus began to mechanically tie up this new being, as if he was performing a task that he had completed thousands of times before. That's when I remembered the tournament. And Rayman 4. And what the fate of all lums would be if Pokelus continued to have his way. I'm not going to tell you how I got out of the Rayman world. As a matter of fact, I'm not even sure what I did myself. How did I get back to normal, you may ask? Well, I didn't. I've been floating around for a while, looking for some way to communicate with the humans. This kind of being that I once was. Eventually, I discovered the internet, and the perfect way to be able to reach thousands of humans at once. I know it's been a year since I became a lum, and that there was plenty of new game systems out there, and even a new Rayman game for the Wii, whatever that is. Pokeless grew tired of his glowing form. He now prefers the body of a massive sea serpent, but Pokeless' hunger still continues to rage in the same way. Rayman is still searching for a way to return the nervous god to his form, peaceful state. So I knew I had to warn everyone. Even if you ever find a new Rayman game on the shelf, be careful. Know what you're getting into before you play. Also, my words must end here. You see, lums are energy, and computers run on energy. And my story was so long that I've nearly used up all my energy writing it. Before I die, I always keep us lums in mind. Have you ever seen a bright yellow light, but you didn't know what it was? Now you know. I'm one of us. It's one of us. Be kind to it. Protect it. Pokeless must not know. Now the world around me is growing dim, so I must bid you farewell.